di ko pa mapaniwala. Maraming salamat sa suporta. Sana patuloy yung suporta niyo sa
Said it many times. Nobody in this world, Russian athletes or Belarusian athletes, support the war. Nobody. How can we support the war? Nobody.
What is going through your minds right now?
I'm so blank. I'm thinking.
Absolute dynamite. That is the only way to describe the moment the reigning sovereign of the court finally broke her silence, forcing the global tennis community to stop dead in its tracks. Aryna Sabalenka has just launched a defense so powerful it felt like a bomb going off. We are witnessing a ferocious clash of fan bases that is effectively splitting the Asian continent in two, all while a once-in-a-generation prodigy appears to be watching her superpowers fade away. The hush that fell over the media room was not just quiet, it was heavy. You could have heard a pin drop from a mile away. For days, perhaps even stretching into weeks, the atmosphere has been suffocating. The entire tennis ecosystem has been terrified to make a move navigating around the massive scandal in the room like it was a landmine, murmuring in shadows but refusing to vocalize the truth that was on absolutely everyone's mind. The pressure had been mounting steadily, bubbling up like a dormant volcano, showing the first terrifying signs of an imminent catastrophic eruption. It was a poisonous blend of digital vitriol, behind-the-scenes power plays, officiating calls that defy logic, and that specific brand of awkward, heavy silence that reveals the administration is simply crossing their fingers, praying that if they turn a blind eye for long enough, the problem will vanish into thin air. But then, Aryna Sabalenka, the undisputed world number one, the athlete who strikes the ball with more ferocity than most people attack their problems, stepped up to the podium. And the actions she took in that moment didn't just ripple through the sport, they fundamentally altered the landscape of the tour. She refused to dance around the issue. She completely bypassed the sanitized lawyer-approved robotic scripts that public relations teams force athletes to memorize. There was no polite smile, no deflection, and absolutely no attempt to soften the blow. Sabalenka stared straight into the heart of the storm and picked her team. She uttered 4 simple words, but they landed with the sheer concussive impact of a 120-mile-per-hour ace down the tee. She is not wrong. That was the phrase. That was the spark. In that singular fleeting second, the narrative did not merely pivot. It shattered into a million jagged fragments. The establishment's fortress of denial, so carefully built brick by brick, was instantly leveled. Suddenly, the floodgates opened, granting permission for every pundit, player, and fan to finally scream what they had been whispering for months. What began as the isolated grievances of a young rising star fighting a system rigged to suppress her has metastasized into a threat that the tennis governing bodies can no longer control. Make no mistake, this is not a drill. This is a full-scale revolution unfolding in real time. We are seeing player unity at its most potent and incredibly scarce form the moment the queen of the WTA throws her full weight behind the struggling princess of the Philippines. When the woman sitting on the throne risks burning bridges with tournament organizers and powerful executives to shield a player who is still scraping to secure her place in the top 50, you realize the ground beneath us has moved. The fanbase clocked it instantly. The reaction was visceral and immediate. The internet went absolutely supernova. Suddenly, high-ranking officials are sweating, forced into closed-door meetings they never wanted to have. Meanwhile, locker rooms from Melbourne to Miami are buzzing as players quietly recalculate the hierarchy, realizing that the true power shifts when the sport's loudest voices weaponize their fame to defend the vulnerable. Welcome to the dawn of a new era in women's tennis, a landscape where the archaic rulebook has been thrown out the window. We have entered a time where keeping your mouth shut is actually the dangerous move, and where a single sentence can spark an inferno that rages across international borders. We are way past the point of debating a bad line call or a confused umpire. This has evolved into a battle for basic respect. This is a crusade for fairness. It is about determining who is allowed to speak up in this industry and who is expected to sit down, shut up, and be thankful for the scraps. And right now, on this broadcast, we are diving deeper into the abyss than any other outlet dares to go, dissecting the scandal that is currently rattling the bedrock of the WTA. We are breaking down the rivalry that is morphing into a vicious proxy war between two massive Asian sporting powerhouses. And we are looking at the young phenomenon, whose sudden collapse has the world wondering if the crushing weight of expectation has finally broken her spirit. Allow me to guide you through the intricate details of a story that dominates every headline, yet remains misunderstood by the masses. Let me demonstrate exactly why Sabalenka's 4-word declaration may have just rewritten the constitutional power dynamics of professional tennis. Let me clarify why the next time these specific players meet on the court, we might need security protocols typically reserved for a heavyweight title fight in Vegas. And I will expose the reasons why one of the brightest luminaries of the next generation could be staring down the barrel of a career-ending crisis. This is the pulse of champions tennis. Fasten your seatbelts because this trajectory is about to get incredibly turbulent. To fully grasp the magnitude of the seismic shift Sabalenka has triggered, we have to turn back the hands of time and analyze the exact context she was addressing. The news cycle in this sport moves at the speed of light. Every sunrise brings a new controversy. Every week delivers fresh drama. A scandal from yesterday is buried by tomorrow's breaking news. However, some injuries do not mend simply because the media stops reporting on them. Instead, they rot underneath the skin, building pressure until the inevitable moment they burst wide open. The turmoil surrounding Alexandra Ila has not resolved itself. It hasn't even begun to scar over. It has been lingering there, concealed by the flimsiest of coverings, while everyone in charge pretends the situation is normal as the infection spreads deeper into the bone. Throughout the roller coaster, that was the 2025 season and into early 2026, Ila has been swimming with sharks in the elite tier of the women's game. If you have been watching closely, and I mean analyzing every point, you have undoubtedly spotted the disturbing trend. She repeatedly finds herself on the losing end of what the authorities euphemistically call interpretation disputed, line calls questionable, let cords, and those pivotal split seconds where an umpire's choice can totally flip the blows. Script of a match. Now, before the comment section accuses me of peddling conspiracy theories, let me be crystal clear. I am not claiming there is a shadowy cabal meeting in a basement to destroy Ila's career. However, I am asserting that we are watching a story as ancient as the sport itself. Perhaps as old as competition exists, the rookie is getting absolutely squeezed. It is the oldest cliché in professional sports because it happens to be true. The rookie gets squeezed by the officials while the veteran gets a free pass. The established icons enjoy the benefit of the doubt on the big points, while the young upstart is forced to work twice as hard just to get a fair shake. You will not find this codified in the rulebooks, and the WTA will certainly never admit it is official policy. But if you sit down with any player who has had to grind their way up from the qualifying rounds, they will tell you the exact same story. The reality of the tour is simple. The game is played completely differently when you are on the outside looking in, before you have earned your membership into the elite club of protected stars. However, this is exactly where Mira Andreeva separates herself from the countless other teenagers, desperately trying to crack the code of the main tour. She stopped accepting the status quo in silence, following her absolutely historic and groundbreaking run to the semifinals of the Miami Open back in the 2025 season. That was the campaign where she dismantled the then world number 2 in a showdown that left the entire tennis community gasping for air, and it was the moment she decided she had earned the right to voice her displeasure. Her recent blistering comments regarding the double standards in officiating, specifically about how the marquee names seem to be gifted every marginal line call, while others must battle against both their opponent and the chair umpire, struck a nerve. She spoke about players having to win despite the officials, rather than with their competence, a statement seen by many tour insiders as a perilous gamble and potentially a career-limiting maneuver for someone so young. Because there is one sacred unwritten rule in the world of professional tennis that everyone knows but nobody speaks aloud. You absolutely do not bite the hand that feeds you, and you never criticize the machinery of the system while you are still fighting tooth and nail to establish your foothold within it. You are supposed to wait until you are untouchable, until your trophy cabinet holds multiple Grand Slams, and your bank account is so full that you can afford to burn bridges without fear of the fallout. You certainly do not dare to speak out when you are hovering outside the top 50, still relying on the goodwill of tournament directors for entry. When you are still dependent on wildcards to enter the premier events, and still trying to prove to the world that you belong in the conversation with the greats, silence is the expected currency. As expected, the backlash was immediate, severe, and entirely predictable. She was labeled entitled arrogant, and accused of trying to achieve too much too soon. The refrain was constant, "Who does this kid think she is?" The critics and naysayers seemed to crawl out of every dark corner of the tennis media landscape to take their shots at her character. Retired players who never had to navigate the minefield of 24-hour social media scrutiny during their own playing days suddenly had very strong, loud opinions about young athletes not knowing their proper place in the hierarchy. Then came the anonymous sources, and we all know exactly what that implies. Fellow players who lacked the courage to attach their names to their quotes began leaking negative stories. The whispers started circulating that she was becoming difficult to work with, that she was developing a reputation as a diva, and that she desperately needed a crash course in humility. The tennis establishment circled the wagons to protect its own, applying immense pressure with a message that was crystal clear: apologize immediately. The ultimatum was to walk back the comments, learn your station in the pecking order, or watch your opportunities for wildcards and sponsorships slowly begin to evaporate. Her campaign at the Australian Open in 2026 ended prematurely in the round of 16 with a dispiriting straight sets defeat to Aryna Sabalenka. Now, context is key here. For any typical 18-year-old rising star, reaching the fourth round of a major Grand Slam would be a massive cause for celebration, a fantastic result, and a solid building block for a long career. That is exactly where you want a teenager to be in their developmental curve. But the problem is that Mira Andreeva is anything but a normal 18-year-old prospect. We are talking about a phenomenon who claimed 2 WTA 1000 titles during the last season and powered her way to the semi-finals of the French Open on the red clay. By the end of 2025, she was ranked world number 5 and was being analyzed not as a future hopeful, but as a legitimate present-day contender for every major trophy. The expectations placed upon her shoulders were not just high, they were astronomical, meaning a fourth-round exit is not viewed as a success but rather as a bitter disappointment. It is being framed as a regression, as undeniable evidence that something in her game or her mentality has gone off the rails, but we need to look closer at the details. The loss itself is not the primary issue, as even the legends of the game drop matches they are expected to win. The real concern lies in the specific manner in which she capitulated. It was the nature of the defeat that raised alarm bells, specifically the way she seemed completely unable to problem solve or adjust her tactics when the momentum shifted against her. It was painful to watch the way she appeared to shrink and crumble under the crushing pressure rather than rising to the occasion as she has done in the past. And now one man, arguably one of the sharpest and most respected tactical minds in the entire history of tennis, has stepped forward to diagnose exactly what is plaguing her game. Brad Gilbert, the legendary coach who has steered multiple champions to Grand Slam glory and the man who literally wrote the manual on winning ugly, has weighed in. This is a tactical genius who can watch mere 30 seconds of footage and tell you precisely what is happening on the court and exactly what technical adjustments need to be made. He took to social media to deliver a brutal diagnosis that is both incredibly catchy and absolutely devastating for a player of her caliber. Gilbert wrote, "The fear hand to me is a major issue in a lot of her losses lately," and that specific term, fear hand, immediately went viral across the tennis world. It is brutal, it is clever, and it is the kind of punchy, ruthless analysis that makes you wince because deep down you know it is 100% accurate. Gilbert continued his breakdown, explaining that her forehand is becoming spinny, passive, short, and error-prone whenever the heat is on. She simply cannot execute anything aggressive from that wing. I believe a lot of the players in the locker room are reading this surgical precision in his analysis and nodding in agreement. He is not simply saying that her forehand has some minor technical hitches. He is declaring that her forehand has transformed into a liability that her opponents are now actively weaponizing against her. He is essentially saying that the secret is out. The word has spread through the locker room, and every single player she faces now knows exactly where to direct their traffic to break her down. This represents the absolute nightmare scenario for any professional athlete, the terrifying moment when your biggest weakness becomes common knowledge to the entire field. When you first burst onto the scene as a prodigy, you win matches based on pure raw talent and the significant advantage of the element of surprise. Your opponents have not studied your tapes yet. They do not recognize your play patterns, and they have not figured out the geometry required to neutralize your strengths or exploit your flaws. You essentially get free wins simply because the tour does not have a comprehensive scouting report on you yet. But eventually and inevitably, the locker room figures you out, and the easy ride comes to a grinding halt. The secret is officially out, and the entire locker room is buzzing with the new scouting report. Coaching teams are dissecting the footage, and the strategy has become painfully obvious. Rivals know that if you target Andrea's forehand when the pressure reaches a boiling point, specifically when the match hangs in the balance and the stadium is deafening, that wing is going to crumble. Facing off against a tactician like Svitolina, a veteran who operates like a surgeon on the court and refuses to gift her opponents a single inch, Andrea appeared completely disoriented and unable to find answers. You do not have to look far for evidence, because the cold, hard numbers paint a devastating picture of her performance. Securing just 59% of points behind her first serve is not just a bad day at the office. That is a catastrophic statistic for a player with her elite status. She failed to take command of the rallies. She could not imprint her authority on the match, and she spent the entire time reacting to shots rather than constructing points. Instead of stepping in and ripping the ball, she was on her heels playing purely to avoid errors, and that tentative fear hand was the root cause of the collapse. However, we need to dig deeper because this issue transcends a simple mechanical glitch or a timing error on the court. This breakdown on the forehand side is not about the grip she uses or the trajectory of her swing. It is entirely a psychological blockade. It is that split second of hesitation that freezes the brain when you suddenly remember that millions of eyes are locked onto you, expecting nothing short of brilliance. It is the insidious voice of doubt whispering in your ear right as you prepare to flatten out a forehand down the line to save a break point. It is the raw, paralyzing fear that you might shank the ball, that you might let everyone down, and that the critics calling you overrated might actually be telling the truth. Once that anxiety infiltrates your mindset, once it weaves itself into your internal monologue, extracting it becomes one of the hardest challenges in sports. The ultimatum delivered by Brad Gilbert was harsh and unmistakable. This technical flaw must be repaired immediately, or her chances of making deep runs at the majors are effectively over. We are talking about a short-term emergency fix, not a project for the off-season or something she can hopefully sort out down the road. Short-term means right now, this very week, because the window of opportunity in professional tennis is notoriously ruthless and slams shut faster than people realize. Mira Andreeva has already accomplished more at the tender age of 18 than most veterans do in a lifetime, boasting a world number 5, ranking shiny trophies and millions in the bank. Yet there is a brutal reality in this industry that does not care about your past achievements or your bank account. None of those accolades matter if you stagnate because the tour is a living organism that demands constant evolution. The weapons that worked in 2025 will be useless in 2026. The very strategies that rocketed you to the top are now being studied in slow motion by every coach on the planet waiting to be dismantled. If you fail to plug the leaks in your game, if you do not reinforce your armor, the narrative surrounding your career will flip from future legend to has-been with terrifying speed, and Andrea is standing right at that precipice. She faces a distinct choice: accept the harsh diagnosis from Gilbert, tear her forehand down to the studs, and put in the grueling hours to fix the mental blocks that turned her biggest weapon into a liability. Or she can choose the path of denial. She can pretend this is just a temporary slump. Tell herself that raw talent is enough to survive and watch helplessly as her ranking points bleed away while the rest of the tour figures out the blueprint to beat her. The history books of tennis are filled to the brim with cautionary tales. We have seen countless prodigies who dazzled early but could not make the necessary adjustments once the veteran players solved the puzzle of their game. The separation between a multi-slam champion and a what-could-have-been story often boils down to how they handle a moment exactly like this one. It requires the humility to admit something is fundamentally broken and the relentless work ethic to do whatever is necessary to repair it. The sheer weight resting on Andreeva's shoulders at this moment is suffocating for someone who has barely entered adulthood. At 18, her biggest concerns should be university applications and navigating her social life, not correcting a biomechanical breakdown on global television. Instead, she is carrying the hopes of her nation, the expectations of sponsors who have invested millions, and the glare of a media machine that loves to build stars up. That same media is equally eager to tear them down, and now they have fresh ammunition with the public revelation that her forehand is a major weak spot. That is a heavy burden for any human being, let alone a teenager. And while some athletes thrive in that pressure cooker, using it to sharpen their focus, others find that the adversity is too much, allowing the doubt to eat them alive until they lose their competitive edge entirely. It starts with a loss of confidence which breeds terrible results, which creates more doubt, creating a doom spiral that spits you out of the top 10 before you know what happened. So which version of Mira Andreeva are we going to witness as the season unfolds over the coming months? Does she have the mental fortitude to reconstruct her game and prove to the world that she truly is the generational superstar we all predicted? Or are we witnessing the start of a slow burn, a gradual fading away, where she goes from being a phenomenon to just another decent player in the draw? The way she answers these questions right now will likely determine the trajectory of her entire career. If Brad Gilbert's assessment is accurate, we will not have to wait long to see the results. On a different note, Aryna Sabalenka is clearly carving out a new role for herself as the tour's matriarch, a battle-hardened leader using her voice to shield the younger generation. Her recent defense of her peers was not just about a single controversy. It was a declaration of the type of leadership she intends to bring to the locker room. She is looking past her own cabinet of trophies and ranking points, focusing instead on the long-term legacy she leaves on the game. Sabalenka is contemplating the culture of the sport and what kind of environment she wants to leave behind for the girls coming up after her retirement. She has realized that a system where teenagers are penalized for honesty, where umpires make mistakes with zero consequences, and where the establishment protects itself over fairness is simply not sustainable. Ladies and gentlemen, what we are witnessing right now transcends the definition of mere athletics. This is no longer just about hitting a ball over a net. She refuses to let her legacy be one of passive acceptance or silence. Instead, she made the bold decision to speak out, knowing full well she was gambling with her reputation. By taking this stand, she risks severing ties with the tour's most powerful brokers and burning bridges that may never be rebuilt, yet she pressed forward solely because her moral compass demanded it. Turning our attention to the other headline story, Alex Ila is evolving into something far greater than a standard tennis pro. She has become a genuine cultural phenomenon and a symbolic movement that extends well beyond the baseline. To say she is merely securing victories and ascending the official world rankings would be a massive understatement of what is actually happening on the ground. While her scorecard is impressive, the real story is how she packs arenas to absolute capacity and forces the top-ranked players in the world to publicly address the shifting tide she represents. She is single-handedly igniting a fire in millions of new fans who previously had zero interest in the sport, converting them into die-hard enthusiasts almost overnight. Ila stands as the ultimate testament to the democratization of this game, living proof that a champion does not need to emerge from the historic strongholds of tennis royalty. Her journey demonstrates that you do not require a bottomless pit of financial resources or exclusive access to elite coaching academies from the moment you learn to walk. She shatters the preconceived notions and rigid archetypes of what a global tennis icon is expected to look like in this modern era. You can hail from the Philippines, a nation where the tennis infrastructure is virtually non-existent, and still stand toe-to-toe with the absolute finest competitors on the planet. That narrative is undeniable, it is electrifying, and it is exactly the type of revolution that redefines athletics. However, standing in stark contrast to this fairy tale is the formidable presence of Wang Senu. She represents the established might of Chinese tennis, a superpower that has absolutely no intention of relinquishing the spotlight without a ferocious battle. We must remember that China has poured billions of dollars into their athletic development programs over the last 30 years to ensure dominance. They operate with state-of-the-art complexes, government-funded initiatives, and a ruthless systematic methodology designed to identify and manufacture elite talent. Li Na originally paved this road, making history as Asia's first Grand Slam singles champion and proving once and for all that Chinese athletes belong at the summit of the sport. Now, as we move through 2026, a fresh wave of Chinese superstars is rising, and they refuse to sit idly by while the Philippines steals the headlines. Wang brings a razor-sharp competitive edge and a deliberate willingness to stoke the fires of rivalry, creating a palpable tension that the tour has lacked. And let's be honest with ourselves, professional tennis is desperate for this energy. Every great sport thrives on villains, on conflict, and on high stakes. The audience needs a compelling reason to pick a side to argue with their friends and to become deeply emotionally entangled in the outcome of a match. Wang may have just raised her hand to play the role of the antagonist, a move that will likely make her incredibly wealthy and globally famous, even if 50% of the tennis world is actively cheering for her defeat. Lastly, we turn our eyes to Mira Andreeva, who serves as a stark, sobering reminder that this path is treacherous and that raw talent and potential are not enough. These are incredibly fragile gifts, and even the most luminous young stars can dim and vanish if they fail to maintain their craft with absolute, unwavering vigilance. In a season otherwise dominated by narratives of triumph and glory, she has unfortunately become the living cautionary tale. She provides a harsh reality check, while others ride the wave of success, and perhaps her struggle is the most crucial story of all, because it forces the entire tour to stay grounded. Her journey reminds us that for every magical Cinderella run, there are 12 other players fighting invisible battles and internal demons that the cameras never capture. As we watch the events of 2026 unfold, it is clear that the WTA Tour has transformed into something fundamentally unrecognizable from its past iterations. The entire script of professional tennis is being torn up and rewritten in real time, with long-standing hierarchies crumbling under the pressure of new challengers. The traditional walls separating the athletes from the fandom are collapsing as social media platforms empower every single individual with a voice and a megaphone. Modern athletes are refusing to simply shut up and play. They demand to express their opinions and shine a light on perceived injustices. They are determined to leverage their massive influence for substantial causes rather than just peddling sneakers and energy drinks to the masses. Crucially, we are seeing a level of solidarity where rivals support one another in ways that would have been unimaginable a few years back, such as Sabalenka publicly validating Ayala's stance. While Sabalenka's comment is a testament to integrity and fairness, Wang's assertion that her fanbase is superior speaks directly to competitive spirit and national pride. When Brad Gilbert describes Andreeva's forehand as having morphed into a fear hand, he is delivering the kind of brutal, unvarnished honesty that is essential at the elite level. Taken in isolation, any single one of these quotes would be a fascinating headline on its own. But viewed together, they illustrate a sport in a state of rapid flux, grappling with complex existential questions regarding fairness, global representation, and the true definition of a modern champion. Now, the only inquiry that truly holds weight as we look forward is simply this: what happens next? Will Sabalenka's dramatic intervention trigger actual systemic changes in the way officials manage and treat the younger generation of players? Or will it merely serve as fodder for sensational headlines before the status quo inevitably returns? Furthermore, will the Ayala versus Wang rivalry blossom into a legendary feud? We are asking if this will become the type of competitive fire that pushes both athletes to greatness and generates moments that will be replayed for decades to come. Or is it destined to fizzle out, dissolving into nothing more than petty arguments and drama on social media platforms? Can Andreeva conquer the mental block affecting her forehand and reclaim her destined trajectory, or will she become yet another tragic example of unfulfilled potential? I have stated this repeatedly over and over again. There is absolutely nobody in this sphere, neither Russian athletes nor Belarusian athletes, who supports the war. Nobody supports it. It is impossible to fathom how anyone could support such conflict. The answer is nobody. Absolutely no. Alex, following what was a truly magnificent performance last season, tell us, how does it feel to finally make your main draw debut here in Melbourne? Honestly, it feels incredible. I am beyond excited. A bit surprised maybe, but mostly just pure excitement.